Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, back with another Talking Supercoach Strategy episode. It's buy. We are talking buys today, very important part of the Supercoach program, and we have a very special guest. We're Supercoach with DR from the Supercoach Swordplay Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, mate.
Thank you very much for having me on, mate. I did join you very briefly for about a 7-minute video, but we're going to crack in a little bit longer and delve deep into what I think is a really, really important discussion point when it comes to strategy and setting up your team going into the season, mate. The buys, as you said, sometimes are a killer, but let's look at this in a positive way. Maybe it gives us an opportunity to get a jump on the competition that aren't preparing as well as some of us are, mate.
For sure. Before we jump into that, as always, check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular YouTube, Spotify. Get in contact with us via X, Supercoach Insider 100 or Swizz26 for me directly. I know I did mention Supercoach Swordplay. Third Man Up is a very big part of your life these days with the podcast there, mate. So I was going to say, where do people find you? Obviously there, but how do people get in contact?
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thanks, mate. So, yeah, Third Man Up's going to be the main Swordplay Twitter account from now on. And if you want to message me personally on X, it's Supercoach_DR if you want to get in contact with me, mate.
Love it. And we did mention in the other pod, but it deserves a second mention. Doing absolutely a wonderful job in the off-season, Supercoach DR with his team, putting together what we've been missing for a long time with it once the AFL prospectus left us, and putting together a brand new guide. Do you want to quickly, briefly tell us about that, mate?
Oh, thank you, mate. You are too kind. I will be very, very quick because we did discuss it a little bit the last time I was chatting with you. But yeah, look, this guide is meant to be your best preseason and in-season resource you can get your hands on. There's been contributions from every big name that you can think of when it comes to Supercoach content creating. Obviously, the three of you boys, to the Squadfather, to Dr. Supercoach, anyone you can think of. So it's been a real community guide. It hasn't just been our hard work. We've obviously put a lot of work into it. But the best thing about this is that we've got the best minds in the game that have put this guide together. I did put a quick video out that's got the contents page. It's over 250 pages, I think, now, Swizz. And now that we've included your brilliant article that you penned earlier on about some of our history of Supercoach, that's even been extended further. So thanks for your support, mate. You are a brilliant writer. You're a man of many talents, but maybe that could be something you do when you retire from whatever you're doing at the moment, mate, is get into a bit of writing, I think, because very, very talented man from what I've read today.
I appreciate that. My wife does think it's funny that I've got an English literature uni major, part of my back when I was doing my degree. But English has never been my best part, as most people probably can tell. And that I'm more of a maths and a stats guy. That, but I do appreciate that because I'm sure she'll get a bit of a laugh about that.
Yeah.
People think I'm a good writer, but no, I do enjoy doing it. When I'm passionate about something, it usually comes out to pretty good. So I was more than happy to help you guys out. You're doing a beautiful job, and as you said, some great content creators jumping on board, including the Squadfather. Yes, my good mate Squadfather, and a few of the other great. There's actually so many talented content creators and people involved in Supercoach, and it was great to see them all get involved.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
All right, so we are here talking buys. Now, it's very different this season. We do have the 8 buys with 3 at the start and 5 in the midfield this time. So we've got rid of these 16 buys in the middle rounds, which is something new. We haven't had this many buys since the inception of the Gold Coast Suns. So this is a brand new thing for all Supercoach players to get their head around. What are your early thoughts about this, mate?
Yeah, look, it can be a little bit frustrating at times because there's a lot of players that do have those early buys that I'd be really interested in selecting. One example could be a Lockie Whitfield in the defensive line. But from what I've been playing around with so far, I'm finding there are particular buys that are trickier to navigate than others. And it really is, for me, a deciding factor. If you're 50-50 between two players, you just can't separate them. I'm then looking at, well, who's got the best buy, the most friendly buy for my squad? Because what we need to keep in mind as well, I could have a particular player in my side that works for my structure, may not work for yours if you're going with something a little bit different, mate. So, paying very, very close attention at the moment. And where possible, trying to avoid selecting too many players. These are premium players that have the early buy. If possible, I'd like to view them as upgrade targets and look for those premiums that have those friendly buys and only one buy rather than that double for the year, mate. So there are probably a few things that I'm looking at the moment with it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's a good point you're making in regards to trying not to have those premiums early. I will put a disclaimer on that because there's three types of fans that we have out there. The majority of you guys try to play for the overall ranking. We want to finish as high as possible and try to get the cash prize at the end, which completely makes sense. I probably should actually say 4 players, but that is the majority of super coaches. So we are there in particular for you guys listening to that. We are focusing on not starting as many people as possible, especially primos as possible from those early buys, and trying to spread out the amount of premiums as we get to the middle rounds. If you are just a pure head-to-head player that plays in leagues with workmates, friends, family, whatever, this doesn't apply to you as much, and you can potentially look at loading up on one particular week where you go, okay, I'm willing to drop that loss to a family member or a friend and try to load up on the other weeks to set your team up better. Also have a look at your head-to-head league rank setup if you are in that situation, because you might only have 8, 10, 12 teams in your league. So you might not even play through the buys. Try to find out from your commissioner if that's how you set up. That's the exact same for draft. For the draft players, if you are a draft or a keeper league that plays the entire season, then you have to be very mindful of that, and it becomes the exact same as we're talking about here in Classic, where if you're a draft league that only has 10 or 12 teams and you skip the buys, which is a possibility, then again, the buy structure does not worry you when you're drafting your players because it doesn't come into effect on how your league is set up. And the last type of player is those, though as much as you're probably not a fan favorite with a lot of the community, but those who go out to just try to win the weekly prize. And if you are setting your team up for that, then you have more opportunities to kind of work around that because there are more buys, and that's usually you're the ones actually trying to target players from a particular round and setting your team up so you can try to win the $1,000 or whatever the prize money is this year, mate.
That's elite, Swizz. And I tell you what, when you first said there's 4 types of players, I'm thinking in my head, all right, league overall, where on earth is he going here? And that's why you do the elite content. We sometimes see that tip of the iceberg and just think, well, buys overall. But you're looking right below the tip of that iceberg, mate, with your advice, because that's one thing I'm very guilty of. I'm always thinking about overall. I'm not really catering at times for the draft players or those guys that are going for leagues and lovely ladies that are going for leagues. So that's why you're one of the best, mate. And it's really got me thinking as well about a couple of things there. Very nice, mate.
No problems. And that's the thing. Like, a lot of our content is usually spread out for the overall. We do try to touch on the draft, but I do know, like, I do have people do message me and like, yeah, I literally play for leagues. What's the best strategy for me to win there? So I do try to include that, and I will try to touch on that. But a lot of the content usually is more focused because of that. We are trying to set our teams to finish as high up as possible. So I thought I'd put that disclaimer in. For those who haven't been following the footy fixture, round 2, we've got the Suns and the Giants. Round 3, we've got the 4 probably worst teams that have the bye together. Your mob, the Premiers, Brisbane Lions, Collingwood, Geelong, and Sydney. Absolute awful. The AFL have done it that way. And then round 4, the rivals in Essendon and Hawthorn. So they're all the teams that are playing in the opening round, which means their premium players' scores will count for, or all their player scores will count towards their value, but we don't get towards our team scores. I would have preferred, and I keep saying this to the honchos over there at the Herald Sun and Supercoach, I would love just to have us play the opening round and then do what the EPL does and have a wild card round, because you're going to get more engagement. It's great for us content creators because we'll have a lot more to talk about. And I think it would really just add something to the Supercoach season, but they're not going there. So that's a bit disappointing. And then we get to the mid-year buy. So round 12, first up, Carlton, North Port and Bulldogs. So you can start these guys, but at the same time, they will be easier trading options too, because once they have had missed that buy, they can play through all the other 4 buys now, and then hopefully throughout the rest of the season. Round 13, Freo are gifted again with sharing it with only a small amount of teams, which is St Kilda. Round 14, Collingwood, Richmond, Sydney, and the Suns. Round 15 is Adelaide, Hawthorn, Melbourne, and West Coast. And then the worst buy, once again, the Brisbane Lions, Essendon, Geelong, and the Giants. And it's the worst buy because most people are trying to get their teams up to full premium at that stage. And then, of course, if you've got premiums from there, they miss that week and you get that one less compared to some of the other premiums.
Very, very well done, mate. Very, very well done. And yeah, I tell you what, just looking, I've got the buys up on my screen here. It's a little bit scary with a couple of those ones, but that's why we're here today, trying to plan ahead and make sure that we give ourselves every chance to have the best opportunity to get some decent scores during some of these tough ones.
Exactly. We might even start off now to focusing on these guys who are playing the opening round and playing and missing out early games. And we might even just target the premiums first up, mate, if you don't want us going in that direction.
Easy.
From a premium point of view, so we're talking right now, Suns, Giants, Brisbane, Collingwood, Cats, Swans, and then Essendon and Hawthorn. Is there any of those players there that are just so shouting out to you to pick that you think, well, actually, I want to put these in your side, or at least in the conversation that you want to pick them?
Absolute premium wise, originally it was Sam Flanders, but the more that I've thought about the pick, the less tempted I am to go there. The buy just really caps it off for me. But looking at his price, I'm still not 100% sure about exactly what his role is going to be. And even though he can score really well in a variety of roles, I just don't think there's any need to start someone like a Sam Flanders. So I have cooled on him. Lockie Whitfield's someone that I'm very, very keen on. I know that Abs, our great friend, the Skodfather, is a big fan of Lockie Whitfield, but he's not someone that I'm absolutely dying to get into my side. Dacos was another one that was in, but when there was a bit of news that he's having some plantar fascia issues, I thought, nah, he's probably out for now. So to be honest, mate, 3 weeks ago, I would have given you a different answer here. But as things currently sit, I do not have any premiums from these teams in my side. Although, someone like an Errol you'd love to have, a Dan Houston. There's lots of players there that you could, but no one that's absolutely banging down the door to make me need to have to select him in my side.
No, and I think that's a great point because Dacos, again, was tempting me a little bit, but with that injury, we just don't need to go there. And the hard thing with these premium guys, unlike some of the players we'll talk about in a moment, it's a big chunk of points to be missing for that 1 week. Yes, we get rookies covering, and this is where the rookies and the reprices become more relevant because it is, and probably the key part we have left out there, it is best 18 for these rounds. So you'll have players coming off your bench covering for these guys, and you can obviously stash them on your bench. But having a guy or a rookie who's probably going to score a 60, you're going to find cover for that. But your top liners in your Dacos, who averaged 117 last year, your Lockie Neals, your Flanders, that's a big chunk of points. And if other people are going premium, so even if they're going 110, your best 18 cover is not going to potentially not going to cover those sort of guys.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And that's what you've got to think. You've got to look at the total points overall. And if you're picking one of these blokes that have an early buy over another premium that doesn't, you've got to ask yourself, well, how are they going to make up those points? Because they miss out on that extra game. And if you think that they can, go for it. And that's fantastic. Back your research. But when I'm comparing, player A with the early buy compared to B with the later buy, very similar type players, I'm finding it hard to really give too many positive reasons why I should be selecting that player with the early buy. That's for those players I'm really 50-50 on, with potential similar output price and all the rest.
100%. So the good thing about, because this year we do have the flex position, so we can go there and see all the players. So I've just sorted by ownership. Now by premium, we usually mean by over 500,000. So already on opening day cost is in 29% of sides, Flanders 23%, and then it massively drops off there. Holmes 15%. Houston is missing the round opening match, so it doesn't affect potential price change, but he still does obviously have that buy. So I think for most of the community are staying away, as you can kind of scroll down for those, and you should usually have access to gold at this time of the year, but in regards to percentages, so it does look like most of the community are staying away from them, but Dacos is still highly owned, and I understand the reasons there, but with the injury and then with Flanders, I think there's better options to go who don't have an early buy. So while you're playing around with your teams, and obviously we have 51 days before we have to worry about lockout, realistically, most of these guys should probably be, real pods. And by pods, if you haven't watched this before, players of difference, because I personally think there's better options.
Agree, mate, wholeheartedly.
But players that we will be looking at from these early buys will be the rookies or the value prices. So that completely changes a different kettle of fish, mate. Now, what are these sort of players that you are looking at in more that wider range?
Yeah, this is where I think we can get the discussion going a little bit more, Swizz, because there are some really tempting options that have those early buys. So if we start off maybe in the defensive line, one bloke that I think is going to be a really popular pick this year, the absolute definition of a fallen premium. Not all of us, Swizz, are into this bloke, and some think he could be a potential bust, but Callum Mills is definitely someone that I think many people are going to start with in their side. He's also sharing the buy with his teammate. Very popular. Well, don't know how popular, but definitely on a few people's radars as a breakout candidate this year after a really hot end to last year, and Matty Roberts. And we can even go down to one of my favourite players in the competition, a little bit biased here, my man Kitty Coleman. So you've got three straight off the bat there that I'm really, really interested in having in my side. And the difficult thing about these three players in particular is the fact that they all share the same buy. So not only do they all have an early buy, but they've got the same buy as well to make things even more tricky down there. If you're really talking premiums, Max Holmes is probably premium, isn't he? But some would view him more as a mid-price type. But those three are probably the main blokes that I'm finding it difficult to work out, well, how many can I actually decide if I want to go through with all three? It's going to be a little bit difficult. I don't know if you want to go into other players or talk about these ones, mate. Where did you sort of want to go with it?
Yeah, well, I think just the mention there is looking at that, as you said, there's three popular ones. Coleman already 58%, coming back from that horrible injury. Mills 45%, and we don't understand why. Roberts not owned as much as 4%. I think as a starting point, if you are going one of these buy players, I think they've got to be highly owned in percentage. I wouldn't want a unique pod who has an early buy, because I think that's even a bigger recipe for disaster. But then you look at sort of straight away, I put the Mills and Coleman in our team. So we've got the 8 spots. Now we do know best 18 can come from any position on the ground. But at the same time, if you start having too many from, in particular in this case, the one buy, which is round 3, it does probably start making it difficult to even get the maximum of your best 18. So I don't know about you, mate, but I feel like at best, I'd only want one person from each of these buys if that's the route that I'm going. I guess you could potentially go 2 if they're value, but also with rookies to sort of be taken into account. I'm finding it hard to pick both, say, a Mills and a Coleman.
I am too. And I've just recently made that change and just experimented what it's like with Mills out of the side, because they've really just been locked next to each other for most of the preseason for me, those two. And the more that I think about it, the more that I'm thinking, yes, it's probably just going to be the one. And although I always view a mid-pricer obviously differently to a premium player. There's still going to be two players with my particular structure at this stage that are really important to that structure, because I'm currently only running with, if I do run with these two, only two premium defenders. So you go to two premium defenders, then you've got these two. Already you're putting pressure on that defensive bench. And if you're also running with someone like a Riley Bice, who may be a popular rookie pick if he gets a chance here at the Swans, and that's another rookie that's gone all of a sudden. And at maximum, you've got 5. So yeah, I'm almost leaning that way as well, Swizz. And there's even some potential midfielders as well, which we'll get into soon. But yeah, it's that buy's a really tricky one, I think. And we certainly cannot overload, because could find ourselves behind the 8 ball right from the start.
And one strategy that the real expert players are going to play with is our bench loopholes. So come, say, in particular round 3, but round 2, 3, 4, but the same situation. If I was to have all of Mills, Coleman, and Bryce, 2 of them are sitting on my bench, 1 of them sitting on field getting a donut. So I'm now going to be relying on the other lines. Now I can do that, but in a perfect world, if I remove, say, Bryce and Coleman, I could have a situation here in my defense where I've got 6 players playing, Mills goes to my bench, and then I can actually loophole a player from that round 3. So on the Thursday night, for example, Essendon are playing Port Adelaide. So if I was looking at another popular defender to pick, who is Saad Al-Hali, and I'm not sort of confident how he's going to go, I could put him on the bench, chuck the emergency on him. If he goes well, Mills comes onto my field. I get Saad's score as part of my best 18. If he doesn't go well, it's not the end of the world. Beautiful. Mills can just stay on my bench, and I'm playing the 6 that are on, and those numbers will make the best 18. So I'm getting actually another bite of the cherry. I'm actually playing 7 players in each line. So that's just a way to exploit the bench, which is probably really next level thinking for it. But our expert players out there will be considering this. And these are the differences to really take your team to that next level.
These are the little things that separate, I think, the elite coaches from the good coaches. You need to look at every little advantage that you can get, and that's exactly where it comes from, mate. And I think another thing, just quickly to mention, with these obviously early season buys, is we could be really set on yes or no for a particular player. The tough thing is going to be, how tempted do you get? Just say, so for example, if you're offer Callum Mills, if he comes out and bangs out a 125, 130 in opening round, does your opinion change, given the fact that that score is now going to be in their price cycle? Although it's only the first score, and that's the one that's going to drop out straight away, that could be something to take into account as well. Are we almost going to be forced into, like, even if you're not on someone like a Kitty, if he comes out and goes a 120, and probably best case scenario we know, and if he gets up and all the rest, but if he does, then it's going to be a really tough decision. Do you have to almost, you're forced to get him in? So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how reactive coaches are to those round 1 scores, and how much you prioritize maybe earning that bit of extra cash gen a little bit earlier, or do you prioritize the fact that they're going to miss out in a game? So it's going to be really interesting to see how people go about that side of things.
And it's a great point, because I think we got to see it for the first time last year, and a lot of people jumped on Brodie Grundy after his round 0 game where he absolutely smashed Gawn, new player to the club. Everyone's like, here we go. How can you not have this guy? Well, for owners, it was absolute disaster up until his first proper buy. So the game that didn't count in our scores was 139. Then we got 71, 99, 114, and 93. Now, they don't sound awful scores.
Don't remind me, mate.
But as a ruckman, it was dreadful. So all of a sudden, yes, his average of 103, but you take that 139 out, and it's a completely different situation. And then what ended up happening, because he had the round 5 buy, his ownership percentage plummeted. It was like the stock exchange in 1987 or 88. It was just bang, everyone's jumping off. And then those who held, well, they were rewarded because he came out and smashed out a 158, and there was a 143 not long after that, and so on, and it kept going, really well for the coaches that did hold. But that was a bit of fool's gold because everyone jumped on, because how can you not? And those who actually went the other way, like our good buddy MJ, who was like, you know what, I like Tristan Cherry, I'm sticking to Tristan Cherry. And even though he wasn't ripping the competition to shreds early on, around that period where people were trading Grundy, he comes out and starts smashing out some good scores. And then people who were wanted to be reactive made the trade, no problems. You still got the scores, but you've burnt a trade compared to everyone, those who went the Cherry option. But those who were like stubborn, like myself, and you just and then you kind of behind the eight ball even further. And I know you're in the same situation there too, mate. So the round zero game can be misleading, and I think if it's more a rookie player, it's a different story, as long as it looks like they can have the role. And maybe say you've got to be mindful of who's missing from that team in round zero, aka Dan Houston for Collingwood, if some rookie or whatever came out and had an awesome score. But if their role looks locked, then maybe jumping on those rookie price players, because you're going to get that big spike. But if they're a round, if they are that premium, I think we've got to temper our expectations, go with what we were thinking, and not be swayed by one game. No different to what we say to people when that preseason hit up, where we see one game, one little bit of data, and go, oh, well, I'm jumping on this, where you might have followed that guy all preseason and he's had a bad one. You're like, oh, well, I'm jumping off now. What's changed just because of one good or one bad performance? A little bit else also to add to that, round two, the Suns and the Giants, they won't have their price change yet. So they're in a kind of different story compared to the other 6 teams in this situation. All right, mate, we'll move to the midfield.
There's so much to think about, isn't it, with these boys? You can sit here for an hour.
Yeah, 100%, mate.
Beautiful,
100%. Mate. All right, we'll ignore the players who have dual position, because for the midfield, we only pick the straight midfielders, and we look at guys who, if they've got forward status for the forward line. So there's probably a couple obvious ones from your mob that I'm sure you'll bring up, but so you can talk about them, and then anybody else that kind of interests you.
Well, obviously my two boys, the Ashcroft brothers, apparently looking very good on the track at the moment. Now, Levi's coming back from a bit of a shoulder, so he's easing into training at the moment. But from all reports, everything that I'm hearing, and I haven't obviously been at training myself, but I know many people that do, everyone that they're speaking to at the club thinks there's a spot for him in the best 22. So he's just that much of a freak, mate. I think he's going to be one of the most highly owned players in the game. And along with his brother there, Mr. Will, this guy's giving me nightmares about starting him. He's been in, he's been out. I'm thinking, is it my Lions bias? I'm trying to take that away. But I think he's going to be a super, super popular pick. And he's another one of those guys that could absolutely boom this year. We know that he's obviously a Norm Smith medalist at 20 years old, got great junior numbers, and he did all this after coming back from a knee reco. So the sky really is the limit for Will Ashcroft. I'll go into probably detail a little bit more as the season goes along, when we get some more news about exactly what roles are looking like. But I think both players will be super, super popular picks. And there's already a couple of Brisbane boys that you can add to the Kitty Coleman pick if you're running with him in your in your back line.
Yeah, so 53% for Levi, 25% for Will at time of recording. But again, you're right. It's this round 3 issue that we're creating here. We straight away, the defense, it was round 3 players here in the midfield. We're going straight to these round 3 players. So it does make it difficult to try to pick them all. And though we are at the moment obviously talking about our starting sides and haven't finished it into the mid-year, but Brisbane again, one of those teams that has that last bye. So if it's a rookie player, it's a kind of different situation. But a player of a premium,
yes, yep.
we can potentially get stuck again later as the season rolls on.
Absolutely, mate. Another bloke that has been in and out of my side as well is Will Day from the Hawks. Another one who I think, if things go right, would have the potential to go bang this year and start to really enter that uber elite status. I know there's a few people that are toying with him as that mid-price option at the moment. So because he's currently in my side, bit of a sneak peek, I suppose, I have taken Callum Mills out of my side. So I'm trying to prioritize who do I want more. And again, things could change, but yeah, Day's currently in for me. And again, this shows how much attention I do pay to the buys because of the Day selection. That's actually affected another selection being Mills on another line. Could I be taking it into too much consideration, taking it too far? Some people are probably saying, don't worry, mate. You know, it's easy. It's just one play. But every little advantage that I can get with my overall score, I'm looking for. And I just don't want to go too overboard early, mate.
Yeah. And the one for me that not many are going to be talking about at the moment, but it's Mitch Nivet. Anybody that's seen the Geelong podcast that I've done with Emily, former winner, 2021 winner, she is very big on Nivet.
Yeah.
And the reason is, as she said on the pod, was they do a lot of the preseason content. Last year, I think it featured, might have featured Henderson. No, Humphreys. Humphreys was the boy that we got on at the right point. And apparently this year, a lot of the extra little bonus content the members are getting is on Nevitt. So that's the sort of stuff she's looking at, and she always looks at who's Geelong kind of featuring this year. He's done the hard yards in the VFL, and yeah, ready made to come in and slot in. Geelong do this every year. So there's another person involved in that, again, round 3 bye that I'm looking at. So it's trying to balance and going, like we talked about the loophole earlier. At least we've got that extra midfield spot, so I can have 2 of these guys sitting on my bench in the midfield from a rookie point of view. But yeah, how many becomes too many?
Nevitt wasn't on my watch list, but if you're getting that from M, former winner and Mad Geelong supporter, that is absolutely good enough for me, mate. On the watch list he goes. That's elite. That's fantastic. Love it.
And the other one that I've been getting questions about, Mini Guns. He has been apparently tearing up the track. He's fit. He's looking good. Popular choice. I think a lot of people are kind of divided. So he's only in 4% at the moment. So he's been getting talked a bit more about from the content creator community side of things, and then obviously Essendon supporters, where a lot of more people are leaning towards Will Ashcroft or Oliver. The one thing I will say about Darcy Parish, if you are considering Will Ashcroft, they are a much of a muchness. So I feel like you can potentially go one if you need the slightly cheaper option. At least with Parish, you know he's playing his role. Where Ashcroft, as much as we expect him to come join that midfield, he was awesome in it. Come the on grand final day, you couldn't knock the bloke at all. But it's still Neil, Dunkley, McCluggage in there with him. So there is that grouping of players that do take a lot of points, and how much percentage of the pie does he grab? Now, I still think he's a fantastic player and can still do that. Where for a young fella there, we haven't actually seen what his ceiling is compared to a Darcy Parish who has done this in the past. We know he is second banana to Merritt in that midfield. So there's nowhere else that Parish plays. Even Merritt has spent a little bit of time just trolling half back in case they need to slow the game down, do things there. Parish doesn't have any other spot he plays. They've tried him at half forward before. It does not work. So if he's fit and firing to go and you are sort of debating between the two, that is a consideration. The other one who is very popular is Clayton Oliver in that price range. So a lot of people are talking to me about, do you recommend starting, say, a Clayton Oliver? And then if that doesn't work out, once Parish or Ashcroft have had their bye, and if one of them is firing, should I then make the swap to them? And I'm like, that is a great strategy to consider, because Clary does have the ability to be one of the top midfielders, but we do know his head and his body sometimes does now, well, in recent times lets him down. If you take the risk, you've got to cut, as you said, one of those get out of jail free cards.
That's a good strategy, and these are things that you've always got to look at. And this is another thing you look at with playing BBL. You've really got to look ahead. We can't be too short-sighted with our side. So that plan of starting with Oliver and then knowing if things don't work out well, then these are my other options. Planning ahead about who those other options could be could really give you that edge and that advantage. And it just goes to show you how important planning is when it comes to your side. And it's not about which players you start. It's about which players you're fading and which players you're planning to have in your side in an ideal world, and which bunch of that group you can afford to start within your starting side. They could present better value than player A to player B. There's so much to think about, and that's why planning ahead is super important, mate.
Yeah, for sure. And I need to add Harry Perryman in there. I'm sure Chris is going to talk to him. Actually, if you've seen that Collingwood pod, I think he speaks about him for 15 minutes, so I'm not going to go on about that. But he has come from the GWS Giants. He is playing midfield. And, the role is there for him. But, that's all I need to kind of add about that. Now, the ruck line, mate, I think everybody's looking at Tristan Sherry.
And you know what? Just while I think about it as well, I did lie with the premiums. Oh, sorry, mate, talking over you. Nick Martin was the only other bloke I have been having a quick look at, because apparently in the pre-season he has been lining up just everywhere. So I don't know if he's going to be an overly popular pick, particularly with that buy, but he's another bloke that if he didn't have that buy would be much higher in consideration for me.
Yeah, so we've talked like Lockie Whitfield. I don't mind the Max Holmes pick. I was big on him last year. It's actually one of the few things I got right. I wrote an article about him for the Code Sports Herald Sun boys, which it did have the breakout. It might be the last year we get him as a defender. But Nick Martin, the thing with the Bombers, and this is where the Zach Merritt talk has come about, the potential halfback. So the way I look at Merritt, and from people I've talked to who have attended Essendon training, Merritt will start in the guts. Then he'll go off for his rest and he'll come back to the guts. But then an issue for the Bombers is not letting those red time goals through. And players like Nick Martin are very offensive. They get the ball and they take on the game, no problems. But he can butcher the ball, and we've seen it tons of times. And Essendon supporters will pulling their hair out as he turns the ball over and they get an easy goal. And there's no real obvious player as outside of maybe McGrath, just because of the experience, but because Ridley's body breaks down, sometimes Redmond, they sometimes need that extra experienced person who can go down there, settle things down, hit up targets, which they know they're going to actually hit up. And the best player to do that is the captain in Zachy Merritt. So it would not surprise me come the 24th minute of each quarter, the midfield is Durham, Martin, Parrish, or Caldwell, with Zachy Merritt lining up at halfback. And if the ball goes down there, get it in his hands, control the game so they can get to the quarter time, 3/4 time break, whatever it is. So Brad Scott can reset the troops and not let any of these late goals in, which just obviously every supporter tears their hair out of. Okay, we'll keep going. Mate, we'll move on to the rucks now. I think the rucks are pretty much most people are looking at Cherry, so we don't have any real dramas there. Is there anybody, because I have heard a few people mentioning your Darcy Camerons, maybe Grundy now that he's got his second year there at the club. Is there any possible way that we can even look at any of these ruck options, or is that just at least one line we don't have to stress about when it comes to the early buys?
I think it's probably one line that we just really don't have to stress about. And look, this is just my opinion, the blokes that I'm looking at, but I haven't seriously looked at a ruckman that has that early buy. I'm looking at, a group of Sherrys, your TDK, Shrek types, even to a Gorn. So personally, no. And I don't think that there's any players that do have that early buy that are giving us that much of a reason to go there knowing that they're missing that early game. And the trouble with ruckman is that they've got such a huge ceiling. You could miss out on a lot of points in 1 week from playing with a ruckman that's got that early buy. So for me personally, no. Are there any that you're looking at yourself, mate, with that early buy with the big boys?
No, I can't say I am. I've had questions in regards to Darcy Cameron and Grundy, but I think I always just say avoid. It's just going to be easier. It's not worth the heartache.
Yeah, with you, mate.
All right, forward line. Again, we're going to have some popular choices. The most obvious choice, and here I think he'll be probably the most owned player come round 1 will be Bailey Smith. And no doubt again, round 3 bye. So just another issue for us. And then you've got the new Bombers live wire and Isaac Kako at number 2 on that spot. I'd say they'd be both, or at least definitely Bailey Smith would be in your side.
Absolutely, mate. Someone that just hasn't moved, and I don't think that he will move. From what I've been hearing, it looks like he's going to be playing a lot of inside midfield at Geelong. A super exciting player. I think that we can often forget about his talent when he's at his best, and he's definitely got his deficiencies. Not the best user of the ball, but I think in the right environment, this is the type of player that could absolutely explode and go to the next level. So I think he's an absolute no-brainer, non-negotiable at the moment. So I would be moving mountain. You don't have to move mountains to get him in. That's the best thing about him. He's a real value type pick, great potential. I'm viewing him at the moment, and this is another discussion, but when I talk about keepers, I'm not always talking about the players that are currently at a premium price. When I'm looking at my structure, I'm viewing Bailey Smith as a keeper. Even though he's priced as a mid-pricer, I'm viewing him as a keeper. When you look at the other names there for potential, I just think that you've got to select him at the moment. So regardless of whether or not I'm going with a Coleman or a Mills, I'm prepared to cop 1 game less from Smith simply because of his price and value and what I think he'll produce, mate. And the other thing that you mentioned was it's very, very dangerous to anti-pod someone that we assume will be one of the highest owned players in the game.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what we were talking about earlier about, that ownership percentage. Same with, say, an Isaac Kako. Might be not in everybody's side, but he's going to be such a highly owned rookie if he is there in round 0 and then come round 1, where even if he does miss and you were to go other options in that forward space, he's not the one that you're going to worry about because everybody's going to have him sitting there on their bench. And carrying 2 guys who, luckily, here in the forward line, we don't have the same problems as the other lines where they're all from the same buy. The 2 popular choices are on different buys. So you can have one as your loophole 1 week and one as your loophole the following week.
Beautiful. Great point, mate.
And we move quickly into that mid period, and this is where it does get really interesting with people starting sides, because when it comes, this is more for premiums. And actually, do you want to touch on DR why we only really want to focus on the premiums for the mid-season buy?
Yeah, and this is something that I think is really important for those people that are starting out playing Supercoach. Our aim by the time these mid-buy periods come along is to hopefully have a fully upgraded side around the time. Now, maybe by 1, by 2, everyone's in a different situation, but our aim is for our rookies that we're starting with, the large majority anyway, to be out of our side by then. So if I've got a rookie on field and maybe 3 share the same mid-season buy, it's not going to worry me too much unless they turn out to be that good that they may somehow become a keeper, which is pretty rare situation, but usually that they won't. And by that stage, they're going to be irrelevant to our buy structure because you'd have a premium in that place. So I think that's why we're not too concerned at this stage, Swizz, about which rookies we're selecting and what mid-season buy they've got.
Yeah, for 100% there. A great example of that would be, say, Adelaide in the midfield. You've got Draper. Melbourne's got Xavier Lindsay and Harvey Langford. So there's 3 potential rookies that you could be starting by round 15. You may keep one. One might turn into one of those keeper types that we've had with Sheasel or Dacos or no problems, but very rare that all 3 are going to be still in your side. You'll be looking at trying to trade them, hopefully up with the money they've made to a guy that's already had their round 12, round 13, round 14 buy, and then you're fully maximizing their price rise, but also points on field.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
Where this is where it gets a little bit more important because we see round 12. So I've sorted this out in regards to the buy players, and we're looking at, and Just so again, the premium price, because a couple of these guys with prices can become premium. I'll drop it down to about 400,000, just to show a little bit more. But if we take a look at the midfield straight off here, we ignore Jason Horne-Francis, but popular choices. Bont 50%. We got Butters 31%. It drops way down on LDU, but I know a few people are keen on LDU. Chera, who I feel like if you're picking him, you're kind of nearly picking him as a keeper, or at least to get you through a good part of the season. And then you've got Rosie, Cripps, and Wardlaw, who's another one people have talked about, especially from the exports point of view. I feel like the choice needs to be two of Bont, Butters, and LDU in particular. I feel like having those three guys in that round 12 space. Now, injuries can happen throughout the season and you can make changes and stuff like that, but you're trying to pick your team for all going well when it comes to premiums. And I think it's one too many premium to be missing in that first buy.
I absolutely agree. And I think why this buy is also tricky is because if you look at Bonds and Butters, by that ownership, it seems like that there may be a lot of teams where they're using Bonds and Butters as those two pillars in the midfield, those two big boys in the midfield. They're locking in from the start, don't have to worry about getting them in. Great vice captain captaincy options. And for the teams that are doing that, it then limits you to what other players you can start from, other premiums you can start from that buy, LDU being a perfect example there. And for those people that like a Rosie, you want to go real pod and Trelaw, who had a really great season last year. Someone like an Eddie Richards, for those crazy people looking at a real pod. It makes it difficult to then select other players. So it's a tricky one. And it's also the first buy as well. So what I'd love to be able to do is potentially leave a couple of these blokes out of my starting side and hopefully leave them as some of my last upgrades after their buy. So that way you're actually getting these players in, and unless injury strikes, they're not actually going to miss a game. Now, for some of these players, you could be a little bit worried about leaving it that long. Maybe it could do more damage leaving it until round 13 to not have a Bont or someone like a Butters in. But I think it's definitely something to think about. Round 13 could be a fantastic buy to get in a couple of those last premiums that you're missing from your full squad, and definitely some of the names that we see here in your midfield. Definite contenders for that.
Well, now some people look at this and go, yeah, well, I could have an LBU because I'm not going to have players on the other buys, and it is best 18. So it doesn't matter if you miss 4 midfielders in the one round because you're going to have defenders from those 4 teams covering it, which I completely understand. The problem is, the players that are also missing from those other rounds. And as we've just said, the players that you're going to trade in. So you get access to 3 trades, potentially 4 if you use your boost. You've got to have options to trade in because that's what the rest of the competition are going to do. They're going to have somebody from either round 13, 14, 15, 16, and where you're taking one less premium. So yeah, you might have a rookie covering and getting a 60 where everyone else has got a premium player getting 110, 120, whatever. But then we get to the end of round 12, we're heading into round 13, and people are now trading in these guys, and you're left there going, well, I've actually got no premium to trade into. So it puts you further behind because now where you're going to maybe now stuck with players later in the round, they've got guys who are going to play right throughout the buys.
That's right. And I think that's a whole buy strategy, isn't it? Really targeting those players after they come off their buy. That's something that I look to do every year around the buys. And I think the buys, as we mentioned in the intro, can be a really scary time for some people, but it can also give you an opportunity to really rise up the ranks if you do it right. So the people that don't pay that much attention, all the little things we're talking about today, if you can at least just consider that. We're not saying you have to use the buys as your be all and end all when you're selecting your side, but the little things like even planning for players after they come off their buy, that could give you a real advantage. And that's usually a season where some really good coaches that do plan and prepare really well start to really rise up the ranks and rocket up the ranks during that point.
Exactly. I was about to say with overall ranks, you see a lot of movement obviously early on, which makes sense because people are figuring out their teams, pods, value plays, all that sort of stuff. The biggest movement is during the buy period. It's definitely where I've had my biggest movements in regards to my overall ranking. And then you find as we get out of that bye period, the change between ranks is quite minimal, because now most people are at full premium unless you're actually copying an injury and your actual rank goes from a negative point of view. A lot of the rankings do stay similar, and it's only really vice captains and captains are really the things that start to separate people in that run home, unless people have saved trades, which for most of us content creators that isn't the case. And you can pull some sort of random move, but you'll find that a lot of people have probably burned a lot of their trades there, and they've become very restrictive, but at the same time their teams are full.
That's right. And everyone's different. I suppose just as a general rule, that's around the time when we start to finish our sides. Now, who knows, if you're ultra aggressive, we've got boosts this year, we've got 5 boosts, you could find a way to do things earlier, but I always like to leave it a little bit later around to those buys, just so I've got that little bit of extra data. And as we said, can target those players that are coming off, knowing that you've got them for the rest of the season. They're not missing any games.
And again, as I said, start of the show, if you are a draft player or just a league player that plays through the buys or completely ignores the buy, go up. Well, we did have Sam Walsh as an option until just recently, and he might be doubtful now, but he still could come into vogue at some point throughout the season. But you could very much still easily go your Bont, Rosie, Butters, LDU, and just load up, because take the loss for 1 week and your team will be flying for the rest of it.
Absolutely, mate.
Yeah. So as I said, that round 12, other players we're going to be having to consider. Harry Sheasel is going to be owned by most of the competition. So straight away, there's one of the best premiums. Colby McKercher may put his hand up and say, you must pick me. It's already in 8% of sides as it is, just there. If you go to the rucks, the most popular ruck in the competition is Tristan Cherry, followed by DeConning, both round 12 players. And then we move on down to the forward line, Caleb Daniel, who could potentially become a keeper for us. And then there's Luke Parker also in there, who is a value selection who could potentially, depending on the role and injuries at North Melbourne, keep going. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5, potentially another 6 players who are top end premiums without looking at anybody else who has become a keeper to add to those 2 to 3 midfielders that we've already talked about. 31 minus 9. We're already down to 22, and we always know we're going to copy rookies that aren't playing anymore and stuff like that. If you go too heavy on this is where you get in a situation where, well, actually it's best 18, but I'm only getting 18, or sometimes even donuts happen.
Exactly right. And even though, as you mentioned, it's only best 18, in an ideal world, you want more than 18, because at least you've got that opportunity for a couple of dud scores to drop off. Because remember, we are playing extra rookies during this time as well. So ideally, you always want to hopefully get a couple of extras and get to that 20 mark. But as you know, mate, we just sometimes scrape to 18 and sometimes don't even quite get there in a really tricky one.
100%. And I'm just sort of filling in the gaps here so the people at home can kind of see. I completely forgot Jason Horne-Francis in that discussion as well, who's going to be a popular pick. So there's another forward that could definitely be in. Yes, again, we do have the flex, so that does open up a little bit more variance for us. But at the same time, I am hearing a lot of these names be talked up. I should probably, because he won't be in many teams here, but Sam Walsh at some point might. Ollie Hollands, even though he's at 2%, could be a real smoky for getting dual position status. So he might become one of those players, because every year there's somebody that steps up that we might not be exactly thinking about, but because of role, 100%. And he's definitely one that could have the role, because Nick Newman has got that season-ending injury, and I know our good mate JP is very hot on him. Bailey Dell in the past, Josh Sin could have that Houston role. Straight off there, if you're looking at popular guys from round 12 on your screen, you can see there is a smack of them. And we haven't even talked about potential rookies who, where we've got Jagger Smith, Finno Sutherland, just to name a couple.
And the other thing, quickly, mate, we talk about popular players, but there's popular players. Sheasel, Sherry, DeConning, Bont, Butters, JHF, Daniel. I've seen them, to be honest, in most sides. It's rarer to not see them from what I've been looking at anyway. So, yeah, very, very tough round, mate. But the thing is that if they are that popular, lots of us are going to be in the same boat in saying that. So,
yeah, for sure. So I think you just got to at least consider when you're making these premium starts, and it might be, again, was as DR said at the start of the show, if you're on the fence, and we're on the fence early on about those round 2, 3, and 4 players, but have a look at these later buys. And if you are deciding between 1 or 2, and a great example here is if we flick off to round 13, and we talked about this at the start of the show about St Kilda and Freo having just the buy completely to themselves. So if I can short this by just the buys now.
They've lucked out again, Swizz, because last year they only shared the buy with Port Adelaide.
They did.
I think it was from memory. And people often, I've had a few questions lately, mate, because I've referred to the good buy. They're like, what's a good buy? Why is it actually a good buy? And the reason for that is because there's only 2 teams that will be missing in this particular week, being St Kilda and Fremantle. So that then will allow us potentially to select maybe a couple more of these players. And we know that they'll be covering when we've got the majority of teams out with those 4 teams missing later on in the year. So that's why we refer to this buy as a particularly good buy, because there's only the 2 teams that are missing.
100%. So we kind of put it in players that we're kind of looking at. Defense, again, it's like you got your Sinclair, your Ryan, maybe your Clark or Wanganeen Malira as a kind of alternative there that some people are looking at. But there's just really not anyone compared to a lot of the others where, we had an absolute, we could have nearly filled a team of choices there before. But realistically, there's a couple there. I don't even think about Steele. I'm thinking Rux, we've got Shrek. Darcy could get dual position to make him a bit more relevant, but for now, we'll take it as it is. And I think with potential ins there, he might not be as popular as some of the other ones. And then we've got the forward line we've got McRae, Phillip, who may be a Bolton. So it doesn't look as anywhere nearly as full as we just saw there when we were filling in those round 12 guys, and it's much easier to try to cover that than the other rounds. And then these guys are perfect, as DR said, to cover your other 4 buys.
Yeah, and I think that's when we're looking at comparing someone like even a Caleb Strong compared to a Nick Dacos, when you're comparing those 2 buys and you are 50-50, it's something that really could put you over the line. And the best thing is that these guys are going to be available when things are at their trickiest. So that's what I really like about them, Swizz.
Yeah, for sure. The last thing we'll talk about before we wind this up, and we need to mention it, is round 16, because it is quite horrific compared to some of the others. Because we did talk start of the show. You've got this situation where these guys will play, but most other teams will be trying to fill their teams and hitting this last bye with as many players playing as possible. So if I click on this, and it's Brisbane, Essendon, Geelong, and the GWS Giants. So there's going to be some very popular players from, hopefully from a rookie point of view that we've upgraded, but more importantly from a premium point of view. And the real one that stands up is the midfield here. So though they're not necessarily high on ownership at the moment, because these guys do have an early buy, we do know what guys like Lachie Neale, Zach Merritt, Josh Dunkley, Tom Green can all do. And it does make it difficult to own too many of these sort of guys before we even get to those other names we talked about earlier, which was Darcy Parish and the Ashcroft boys.
That's right, because even though, and we touch on this as well, Parish is priced as a mid-pricer, we're picking him for a premium. We're not picking Darcy Parish as a stepping stone. We want him as a premium player, the definition of a fallen premium. And you add these guys like Tom Green, the Lockie Neal, Zeret. I think every year, without fail, Zeret's made his way into my side. It just seems like there's a situation where it's a good time to pick him up and I get him in. But I don't think there's too many of these players, well, the top 5 that you look at there, that you'd be saying, well, I wouldn't be too happy not, having him. You'd be rapt having him in his starting side. Your Neil, Zerets, and we don't know what's going to happen, but they're all pretty big names there, Swizz. So makes things difficult there if you're interested in just say your combo of Brisbane Lions.
Yeah, well, that's right. We were talking earlier about both Ashcrofts are going to be very popular choices at the start. So if you're picking 2 of them already, it does limit you what you want to do if Levi does potentially become a keeper. Like if he's tradable out, then it's a different story. But I know some people are still looking at your Neils or your Merritts to start with. Parrish, as I said, I'm getting questions. Cam Guthrie, who I haven't even added there, I'm getting questions about. Now he's at that mid-price thing, price where you'd hope to upgrade him, but we're going off this as we're expecting to upgrade them. What happens if Parrish or Guthrie or Will Ashcroft average 110 and become keepers? And you're you've gone in with a plan saying, well, I'm going to just trade them out as they come to their buy. So that I'm right to start Merritt and Neil with them because they'll be gone. And all of a sudden you get to this situation and you can't trade them out. And then you're still going to have guys in your forward line or your defense. And all of again, you're playing teams, especially the head-to-head situation. Well, it might not be a big deal for you. You'll cop the loss, but then overall, other people have planned around. Well, I've managed to manage my buys properly, where I'm not really affected by this. I've got a couple of premiums, but I can cover that. And then you've gone, oh, hang on, now I've got 5-6 missing. Your ranking might have looked good for a moment, but it's going to drop severely.
Exactly right. Another thing we can be guilty of at times as well is planning really well for the buys of our initial starting team. But as the season goes, those guys, they're almost so cheap that you just can't not select them. Things change and plans change. And sometimes it's almost out of your hands. If there's a deal on the table that's just that good, you've almost just got to grab the player regardless of what buy they've got. So that's another really good point, mate. You already mentioned before that injuries occur, so you could have a really, really great structure. You lose a couple of guys from a particular buy, you bring a couple of guys in from a different buy. All of a sudden, things are looking very, very different.
And that happens all the time where people they have a plan, but then they're trading because you've just got to pick some player that's a hype player that we get on. So if you've loaded up too much, and I think those who play BBL find this out the most, because we all try to load up on double games because it's the one sport we get it in NBL as well, but in particular because of the limited amount of teams that we have to choose from. So people go loading up to that, or they have a plan to bring those players in who are coming up to a double buy, and they haven't planned around already having some of them in. And then what happens is another guy comes out and makes a massive score. His break evens in the minuses. Everyone's jumping on this guy. And you're like, but I need to get the double players. And everyone's like, well, I've already planned around having a couple of double players. I can leave one on the shelf because you need this cash gen player. And again, it hamstrings you too compared to the rest of the competition.
100%. And that's another reason, quickly, Suze, why I'm a fan of playing your NBL and your BBL super coaches. Even if you're not really passionate about the sport or you don't know a lot about it, it's actually, I've found it really good practice for AFL super coach. And as you said, that notion of planning ahead has really helped me. I know last year with my AFL game. So for anyone that's maybe missed out or hasn't played any of the other Supercoach versions this year, I'd really recommend next season, jump on. Use it as almost like your AFL Supercoach preseason training. Just get your mind ticking, get your game mind involved in the game. And I found that it's really, really helped me in other versions. Things transfer across, the skills transfer across. You learn new things as well.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I love playing these other games. And the last thing I'll probably say about the buys, Geelong, that awful buy last round. Try not to burn all your trades. My good mate Abs, if you're watching this, do not try to burn all your trades straight off, because Geelong's run home is they play Richmond at home, the Giants away, which will be, could be a tough one, depends on how the Giants are travelling. Saints at home, North Melbourne, Port at home, Essendon at home. Again, Swans, slight tough one there up there in Sydney, and then they've got Richmond again one final time. So they get the Tigers twice on the run home, which is just ridiculous. That is juicy. North Melbourne, who could improve, as a Richmond supporter, I'm hoping they're not, just because their draft picks tied to us. The Bombers down there, Bombers supporters, if it was at Marvel, I think you'd be giving yourselves a good chance, but you'd be fearing the travel down there as well. It's probably as good of a run home draw as you can get. I don't know why Geelong were absolutely handed that for the run home. So you might need a trade or two up your sleeve to either get Holmes, potentially Jeremy Cameron, whoever is looking like the players that are just going to rip these teams a new one, especially Richmond, because there's going to be teams that will have already thought about this, and they're going to have the Geelong players ready to go because, especially my boys are giving absolutely nothing by that time of the year.
I'll tell you can give Richmond crap because you're a very loyal supporter to them, mate. So, look, who knows? Look, the exciting thing is that you've got the pleasure of hopefully watching a really elite young group of men develop and grow together into fantastic AFL players. And if all things go well, we could see a dynasty coming back very, very shortly, Swizz. Hopefully for your sake anyway, mate.
100%, mate. I know the pain is now, and I'm looking at that fixture when they probably get a bit tighter in the season, and if God forbid if injuries happen to the senior guys, that we might be on the especially if Geelong are chasing percentage, on the receiving end of a couple awful hidings. But from a Richmond supporter and the Richmond supporters out there, just think back when the Cats belted us by 150 points in, I think, 2006. It was the start of, I think that's when we started bringing in Dusty and Rewald and Cochin and all those players, and it built from there. So, that they might have to cop some short-term pain. Might be bad on that day, but, you forget about these things when you're beating a team like that in the grand final.
Oh, absolutely. And even Brisbane, where we've come from, think about when Leppich went and Fagan just came in. Absolute shambles there, mate. We were getting pumped every week, but you get a good core of young blokes in, you get a good coach in, people surrounding him, then you're giving your chance every yourself for future success anyway, mate.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I think that's it from us. I hope you guys have enjoyed our insight of our buys. I know I've loved chatting with you, mate, and I'll continue to look out for other Supercoach strategies throughout the off season. Final thoughts, mate?
Oh, look, I just want to thank you very much for having me on again, mate. The great thing is, although I love chatting you about anything, particularly Supercoach, but there's a couple of things that you mentioned during our chat that I just had not considered. And that's a great thing about this. Chatting with other people, networking, communicating, you get these little ideas. And hey, even if you don't necessarily agree with them or you're not going to use them, it's great food for thought, fantastic food for thought. But I suppose just to summarize, mate, a couple of really important points is that we're trying to encourage people, if you can, to stay away from selecting too many of those premiums that have the early buys. We really try and want to focus on those premiums that have this single buy if possible. Don't worry too much about your rookie buy structure at the moment, because by the time our second buys come, the most difficult buys, hopefully those blokes won't be there. Don't use the buys as all you're planning. Maybe, as we said before, if you're 50-50 on a couple of blokes, then maybe look at the buy structure and let that help you to make your decision. But at the end of the day, mate, there's no perfect plan. We can plan our teams as good as we can for the buys, have such an even split. But within a couple of rounds, we saw even what happened with some of the rookies last year, Reed, Gipkus, Caulfield, see you later, straight away. And all of a sudden we're going, well, I was so prepared and my best plans are now out the window. So do what you can, but keep in mind that there's a high chance that you will need to alter these plans as the season goes along, mate. But yeah, probably last advice from me, apart from saying thank you very, very much. Everyone that's not subscribed yet to Swizz and the Boys, please make sure that you do. When we were making this guide, they were three of the first blokes that we thought about that we really wanted to get in here. Love the banter, mate. Love the information. I think you guys have just got a perfect balance between giving the viewers entertainment as well as super advice that you can take into hopefully getting a career best season, Swizz.
No, I do appreciate that, mate. And the same with our fans to you, but I'm pretty sure most of our fans will be following you already because you're one of the best in the business, mate. So that's why I wanted you on, and always love, mate. I could chat Supercoach with you all day long. You know that.
Likewise, bud.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, DR. Thank you, Supercoach community, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
See you guys.